I know you like to spin a good dad joke once in a while. Are dad jokes, are they a fruit of the Spirit, or is it something we need to ask forgiveness for that sin? What are your thoughts on that, Pastor Phil?
They're a generational curse. I know that my dad told the corniest jokes, and I was always rolling my eyes. And I think my girls have rolled their eyes so much that they've rolled out of their heads sometimes.
This is The Calling with Steve Smith, a Family Life original podcast that talks with pastors about the professional and personal challenges they face in their mission to lead others to Christ. Our guest for episode 5 is Pastor Phil Barner of the Andover Alliance Church.
So has it been 14 years now, Pastor Phil? 14 years since as you've been leading that congregation?
Yes, it is. I started March 4th, 14 years ago.
How about that? So let's take it back a little farther before 14 years ago. When you were growing up, let's say, this is almost graduation time for a lot of kids, whether it be, getting close to high school. In high school, were you the Jesus kid around everybody? Would anybody in your high school be surprised that you're doing what you're doing now?
I don't know if they would be surprised, but I know probably because I went to a pretty big high school. I had a graduating class of 400 some. So I think a lot of people would be like, Phil, who?
Gotcha. So who were you in high school? What, high schools have this thing of, I hate to use the word cliques, but, people, everybody has different interests in high school. What group were you in?
Well, I was in the band, and there was also just some kids who were, I guess the only clique that I was in was the band. The others was just, I had a few friends, but it wasn't any target group sort of thing.
What instrument did you play?
Trombone.
When's the last time you played your trombone?
Well, I actually gave my trombone to my daughter, and she played it for a while. Cool. And then she found that it was so beat up that she wasn't getting good sound out of it, so she got a better trombone.
I asked this, let's fast forward now. We go from high school to current day, and in between the Reader's Digest version. And if I talk to 100 pastors, I get 100 different stories on how they ended up being a pastor. Tell us your journey a little bit, and I know that could take a long time, but basically how God led you to the ministry.
Well, the fact that God called me to be a pastor just shows his sense of humor, because I always fell asleep in church. In fact, I still fall asleep in church when I'm not preaching. So I can imagine him seeing me fall asleep in a service and go, I'm going to make him a pastor. But actually, I had always felt a burden to go overseas as a missionary, because I'd hear about the need for people to hear about Jesus overseas. And I think, yes, I will go. And I grew up going to a Christian camp, Delta Lake Camp in Rome, New York. And I thought, yes, I will go. And I went through the whole process to be a missionary. And 3 times they said, no, we don't think you're called to be a missionary. But then they redirected me to be a pastor.
And I found this interesting. Tell us how the puppet ministry got started and how you've seen that grow and work. See how God works through that over the years.
I always enjoyed puppets, and I'd been doing puppets in some form since I was about 5 years old. In fact, I would put on a puppet show that I made up as I went along for the neighbor kids and charged them 3 cents admission. And they paid it because I promised refreshments. which I'd be like, okay, intermission. Where's the refreshments? What's in the refrigerator?
Yeah.
But then my church had that I grew up in. They had a puppet team, and I was part of that. And actually, there was a local weather person that was in Albany area. There was a local weather person who had a little 5-minute show, and she invited our puppet team to be involved in that. And so we were on that a number of times and got a positive reinforcement there. And then when I went to college, I started, it was Nyack College near New York City. And we would have these gospel teams that would go into New York City and present the gospel. And I started a puppet team, gospel team, and went into New York City just doing puppets. Actually, Sandy, who later became my wife, she was a part of that puppet team, gospel team. That's how we met. Although at the time, she didn't think that I was the kind of person that she'd be interested in. And she told her friends that if I was the last man on earth, she'd never marry me. So I am so glad that she changed her mind. It took 7 years, though.
That's yeah.
But then in everywhere that I've ministered, I've found that puppets have been helpful, from being in Youth of the Mission and did puppets there to now I'm in a church that we don't really have many kids that come, but I had started doing a children's message with puppets, and they won't let me stop. And we have a puppet team that we've done puppets in different churches for a local maple festival, for a local balloon rally. Just whenever we get the opportunity, we like to do puppets.
Do you do puppets in your hospital ministry?
I used to, but when the pandemic hit, then there was concern regarding could there be some kind of diseases passed on the puppets, and I had recently asked actually if I could start bringing a puppet with me again, and they said, well, if you wipe them down after each time. And so I thought, okay, that's a no.
Okay. Right. Those dirty puppets. Isn't there an interesting lesson there, Pastor, about, okay, your interest in puppets since you were a kid? Doesn't God put certain gifts and interest in things? And sometimes some people may look at it and go like, well, that's a silly thing, or I'm not saying puppets are silly, but whatever their interest might be, like I love pens, or I like this, or I like something that seems odd to them. And it's like, how can God ever use something like that? But don't you think that God puts interest in us for a reason?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you tell God, I am willing to do whatever you want me to do, and you can use whatever I have, he will. So I found that many times, when, like you had said, something that I don't think might be useful, find out that it is.
I find
as long as we're willing and obedient.
Now, you do a lot of work in your community outside the church, and that's intentional, isn't it? Tell us about that.
I am the treasurer for the local Lions Club. I am the treasurer for the local 4th of July committee. Next year, the Andover is celebrating its bicentennial, and so they have formed a bicentennial committee, and I'm a part of that. And largely because I can't expect people to just come to our church if they don't see a need. And so I want to do what I can in reaching out to the needs of the people. And so different people look at me in different ways. I mean, some people, they'll be like, oh, you're the person who visited me in the hospital. Other people will be like, oh, yeah, I know you from the Lions Club or the 4th of July, or, oh, you're the guy who is walking his dog all the time.
Right.
So it's just being in the community so that I have those opportunities to share the gospel with Jesus Christ. Because in a small town, most of the time you face people are more responsive to people that they know, people that they grew up with. And they didn't grow up with me, but they know me because they've seen me in the Lions Club or the 4th of July committee or visiting in the hospital or whatever the case may be.
How have you navigated since 2020? Every church is a little bit different now that we're several years out past 2020, but how did you navigate the COVID situation, and how do you see that during and now as we're in 2023, how that has affected your church, whether it be positive or negative? What are your thoughts looking back?
Well, the one thing that the pandemic did is it forced us to have more of an online presence. And so we started doing a live stream for the services, the worship services. And we realized, hey, there is an opportunity to reach out to people who might not come to the church, but they might check out a service online. And there's not a lot of people who check out our church online, but then I find out that there's more than I realized. And that is a positive, I think. But even in the midst of that, and when we weren't allowed to come, there were some who would say, is it okay if I'm really quiet and I sit in the back when you're recording the service, that I could come and be a part of things? And we said, yeah, we're not going to tell on you. So there were some people who really wanted to be there, even if it wasn't an official service. And I appreciate that, because what I'm preaching on Sunday is from Hebrews chapter 10, where it says not to forsake meeting together as some in the habit are in the habit of doing, but to do that all the more as we see the day approaching. I don't know about you, but I think the day of Christ's return is getting closer and closer. And I suppose some would say, well, no, duh, because we're further along in time. But I think that God is preparing to do something great. And there are still some people who stopped coming to church, and of course, during the pandemic, and haven't come back. And sometimes they may check it online. Sometimes they don't. It's really hard to tell, but I am glad for that opportunity to extend our reach.
Talking with Pastor Phil Barner of Andover Alliance Church. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I think every time we have a share-a-thon and we begin even every day in prayer, and we pray, because a lot of people look on the outside and they go, oh, you must be in competition with other Christian radio stations and things like that. And really the bottom line is we're all in ministry together. How do you view, and what steps are taken in your community with other churches, and how important do you think that is for other churches to, I'm not saying have the same service, but the pastors get together and do things as a community together? You know, we're different individual churches, but we're all the church.
Well, we can do more together than we can ever do on our own. And it is also an effective way to keep people from just going from church to church to church with, for instance, if they're sad but true, there's some people who will try to take advantage of the church. And so they'll go to a number of different churches with the same story asking for help. And when we have found in our area, because I'm involved in 3 ministeriums, one in the pastors in Andover try to get together 4 times a year, but that way we can work together. And in nearby Wellsville, the churches get together. I'm the vice president of that ministerium, and we funnel everything through the Salvation Army, because they know those who really are in need and those who unfortunately are just looking for a handout. And working together, we are able to emphasize those strengths that we might not have in somebody else, and they can emphasize ours. The chapel in Buffalo, there's a guy there who's a statistician, and he realized that even with all that they do, they could only reach just a small percentage of their area by themselves. They saw a need to work together with the other churches so that they can more effectively reach the entire community for Jesus Christ. And that's what we try to do here, to work together. And we've seen God do some cool things through having a group that studies revivals, the George Otis Foundation, coming and saying, okay, this is what is involved in all the different cases of a real revival, and then going, okay, let's start out with prayer. Let's do what we can. And they actually were saying that they were encouraging that we're doing all the right things, and we are expecting God to do a mighty work.
Changing gears a little bit, but I think they have commonalities between physical exercise and exercising our faith and getting in the Word. You are an avid exerciser. You like to run. I bet you there's some days, running, I'm asking now, or exercising, that you probably just don't feel like it. You're not, whether it be physically or mentally, you just don't feel like exercising, but you know the positive effects of that. And doesn't that really lend itself spiritually? There's a lot of common ground between those two, aren't there?
Oh yeah, and to say that I like to run is a bit of an overstatement. I do it, but I don't really like it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And usually I'll say, how many smiling runners have you seen?
Yeah.
Because there are some, but there is so much in Scripture about running, about keeping your eye on the prize. And my life verse is from Galatians, where it says, you were running a good race. Who cut in on you and kept you from knowing the truth? Because I have been in many races where I must admit, I do not know how to pace myself. I have one speed and it's full. And the older I get, the slower it gets. But I will start out as fast as I can, and I end out not nearly as fast, but knowing that I've done everything that I can. And it was interesting. I was saying, I used that as a sermon illustration a couple weeks ago, again, preaching from Hebrews 11, actually. I'm working through Hebrews backwards. But anyway, and I was saying about a race I was in where I saw on the back of the shirt of somebody in front of me, it said, never quit. And all through that race, it was a brutal race. It was at night. It was windy. It was rainy. People kept passing me, but I just kept thinking, never quit, never quit. And I finished. I didn't finish first. I didn't finish last, but maybe pretty close to it. But I knew I didn't quit. And then I realized, how many other things do I need to keep that same attitude? Never quit, never quit, never quit. And a lady told me the next week that there were a number of times during the week that she felt like quitting, but she thought, well, pastor doesn't when he's running, I won't either.
You're listening to The Calling, a podcast talking with local pastors and pastors all over just about their feelings about different things, the church and life. And we're talking with Pastor Phil Barner of Andover Alliance Church. And a common question that I've asked if people have heard these episodes, but I can't help but ask it almost every single time, because pastors, not only are they doing their work at the church, but you've mentioned already all the different activities you're involved with, the exercise you're doing. You have a family. How do you find time to rest? And is that a challenge for you?
It is, and it's not one that I must admit that I've done well in, especially with my wife has a busy schedule as well. We're very much partners in ministry, but then also she's involved with local Girl Scouts. She teaches, or rather, she is a school nurse, and she works as a drug and alcohol rehab nurse as well. And so there are times when we have to really work into our busy schedule time just to have a date together. I've made a goal of having 2 dates a month, and it's not an ambitious goal, but sometimes it's hard to even get that in, but to make that time for each other. My 2 daughters are grown and out of the house, but we still try to keep in contact with them, with phoning them, with emailing. And I must admit, my wife is better with my youngest daughter with that, and my oldest daughter, there's a number of times just taking her to work, because right now she's relying on us to take her to work, and so I appreciate those opportunities just to talk with her, and because, well, she's a captive audience.
I don't think
while she's in the car with me.
Right. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school or church in this matter, and maybe you can answer this theological question for me. I know you like to spin a good dad joke once in a while. Are dad jokes, are they a fruit of the Spirit, or is it something we need to ask forgiveness for that sin? What are your thoughts on that, Pastor Phil?
They're a generational curse. I know that my dad told the corniest jokes, and I was always rolling my eyes. And I think my girls have rolled their eyes so much that they've rolled out of their heads sometimes.
Boy.
Because,
Amen.
But there are times when my youngest daughter especially, she'd say, "Dad, you're just not funny." It doesn't stop me any. But then I will tell her, well, there are others who would disagree with you. If she's in a real irritable mood, she'll say, name them. But so I would call them a generational curse, and I would not be surprised if when and if my daughters have kids, they would wind up telling some of those corny jokes to their kids as well. I was just talking with somebody about a Lions Club thing, and there's unfortunately a meeting of the Lions Club at the same time we have a governing board meeting. So I was telling the guy that I couldn't make it to the meeting, and he said, well, got a good joke for me? So I told him one he could use. You want to hear it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. You probably heard this before, because you know all of them.
Right. That's never stopped me. I only know 3 or 4 jokes. I just keep telling them over and over again.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, this guy, he's on the train, and he's heading for Smithville, and he goes to the conductor and he says, when does the train stop in Smithville? And he says, oh, I am sorry, this train doesn't stop in Smithville. Well, what do? I need to stop in Smithville. Says, well, I tell you what, I'll slow down as much as I can when we get to the station, and I'll hold you out the window, but you need to have your legs pumping. So when you hit the ground, you hit the ground running, because if you don't, you're just going to fall flat on your face and you're going to hurt yourself. And then you can just gradually slow down and you'll be where you need to go. He says, okay. So he says, okay, we're coming close to Smithville. Holds him out, and the guy's pumping his legs, and he drops him off, and he's trying to slow down, and then the train is passing, and somebody in the caboose grabs him and pulls him on the train and says, you're lucky I saw you, because this train doesn't stop in Smithville.
I'd be laughing, but I have allergies right now, and my laugh doesn't sound very good. But Why?
I was going to say that silence was about what I expected.
That's okay. Everybody, I can feel the eyes rolling everywhere. But speaking of the eyes rolling, has any of your daughters mentioned, or anybody have mentioned, that how you, when someone stares into your face and looks at you, how similar you are to a certain kind of, a process of milk, when they stare at you, when they see your pastor eyes?
Have
they?
No, but
no?
If they hear this podcast, they might.
Well, or they may just click stop all of a sudden. They could do that. They could do that.
Hopefully not.
Pastor Phil Barnum, we appreciate you taking your time. Thank you for what you do on a daily basis, not only for your church, but your community. It's a great example. You're giving your flock as you lead them. So blessings on you, and blessings on your wife and family and the Andover Alliance Church. Thanks for taking your time today.
Thank you. You're very gracious.
You've been listening to episode 5 of The Calling, a Family Life original podcast. Be sure to check out all of Family Life's original podcasts, including Therese Talk, If That Makes Sense, The Parable Podcast, and Business by the Book. You can find them wherever you download content or at familylife.org. Family Life is a not-for-profit, listener-supported ministry, relying on your generous support to make podcasts like this possible. Find out how you can get involved when you go to familylife.org.